A meal ends in murder tonight. Welcome to Wolfe's Casebook. I am your host, Enigma. Comment with your location. I enjoy reading every message. Let's uncover the first clue. If there is one thing about living in Nero Wolfe's brownstone that you learn fast, it is this. The man does not tolerate surprises before dinner. After dinner, he doesn't much like them either, but before dinner, they're a felony. Between 4 and 6:30, the house runs on a schedule so tight you could tune a violin with it. Fritz Brenner is a one-man culinary battalion. Theodore Horstmann is upstairs with the orchids, and Wolfe is in his office with the door closed, sitting behind that custom red leather desk chair that makes him look like an immovable monument to appetite and certainty. My job in that stretch of time is to keep the doorbell from turning into a trumpet of doom. If the phone rings, I screen it. If somebody arrives without ironclad credentials, I intercept. Theoretically, I'm an assistant. Practically, I'm the shock absorber between a civilized genius and an uncivilized town. That Tuesday in early November, cold enough outside to keep the riffraff on their own stoops, I was in the front room polishing up the last third of the times when the bell went. I'd already done the day's tally of uninvited humanity. 2 salesmen, a charity lady with eyelashes you could dust furniture with, and a guy who wanted Wolfe to endorse a magazine called True Crimes for Real Men. I'd shooed the magazine man off the steps and informed the charity lady that Mr. Wolfe gave to causes by writing checks to his own comfort. I was hoping for a quiet finish. The bell went again. I checked the clock. 5:10. The danger hour. I opened the door 2 inches, just enough to learn the future, and found a woman there who did not look like trouble and therefore usually was. Not young, not old, somewhere in the country of 39 with a passport stamped in New York taxes. She had a good coat, black wool with a collar that had never met a bargain rack, and a hat that seemed too deliberate to be warm. Her face was narrow, composed, and expensive without being flashy. The kind of face that had learned early that if it held still, the world would arrange itself around it. She said, "Mr. Goodwin?" "Depends who's asking," I told her. "Celeste Varin. I called this afternoon." "Oh, that." At 2:30, a voice had phoned and asked to see Wolfe about a matter involving a private dinner. I had done my routine, which is to say, I'd asked 3 questions, gotten 2 evasions and 1 name, and finally said she could come at 5:30 because I was feeling generous and because the name had the ring of money. Wolfe doesn't crave money the way a normal human does. He craves not being bothered. But money is sometimes the only language that makes him set his preferences down on a dusty shelf. "You're early," I said. "I wasn't sure about traffic. May I come in?" Not a waver in her tone. She either was used to getting indoors or not used to asking. Either way, it didn't help my mood. I let her in because she had an appointment and because it didn't pay to make a fuss on the steps. The fuss always ends inside anyway, at twice the volume. She stepped into the hall and stopped as if she intended to read the plaque on the wall to see if the place was real. People do that in a brownstone. It's older than their mortgages and smells of furniture polish, orchids, and the kind of quiet you can hear in your teeth. "We'll go in," I said, and took her through to the office. Wolfe was at his desk as expected, a big figure in a big chair, looking like he had been carved by a sculptor who specialized in disapproval. He didn't get up. He doesn't get up unless there's a fire or a good joke, and fires are more common. His eyes moved to her, took in the coat, hat, shoes, and expression, and then moved to me like I was a messenger who had brought him a pie filled with nails. "Mr. Wolfe," I said. "Miss Celeste Varin." "Mrs.," she corrected softly. Wolfe grunted. It serves him as greeting, punctuation, and often verdict. I pulled my chair into position at the side desk and sat down. If anything interesting happened, I wanted a front row seat. "Mrs. Varin," Wolfe said. His voice was calm and thick, the tone of a man who expects words to behave. Mr. Goodwin told me you wished to consult me concerning a dinner. Yes. She had taken the one chair opposite him without asking, which I liked. People who ask Wolfe for permission generally don't bring the kind of trouble worth charging for. I'm sorry to intrude at this hour, but the matter is urgent. Urgent is a label affixed by the impatient, Wolfe said. Nevertheless, you're here. Proceed. She looked at him straight on. Most people do that for about 5 seconds and then angle their gaze somewhere safer, like his tie or his forehead. Mrs. Varyn held steady, which told me 2 things. Either she was brave, or she had already made up her mind that she was right and would not be moved by gravity or genius. My husband, Lawrence Varyn, was to host a dinner this Friday evening at our apartment on West 71st Street. 8 people in all. It was important to him. The guest list included one of his partners, a representative from a financial group, a state senator, and a few friends. He had been building to it for weeks. Wolfe's eyebrows lifted a fraction. Anything that takes weeks to build and collapses suddenly usually leaves debris. She continued. Yesterday morning, Lawrence was found dead at the dining table. There it was, laid right out without embroidery, like a card on a felt table. I felt my neck tighten, the reflex you get when someone says the word dead inside this house. Wolfe doesn't like murder any more than he likes an unscheduled visitor. Murder means police, noise, and human emotion leaking into his carpets. He endures it because his mind is a machine that can't resist the puzzle. But he never says that. I'm sorry, Wolfe said, which for him is a full bouquet. Was it murder? The police consider it uncertain. She paused, and I could see she hated the word. They say heart failure is possible. They say an allergic reaction is possible. They say perhaps he took something by accident. They also say perhaps he did not. And you? Wolfe asked. I know my husband. She said it as if that should end all debate. He was 46. Healthy. No allergies that would cause this. He did not take drugs recreationally and he did not drink to excess. He had no reason to kill himself. Wolfe's eyelids lowered a hair. No reason discernible to you? None, she said, and I knew his reasons better than most. That got a tick of interest out of me. Wives who say they know a man's reasons better than most sometimes mean better than anyone, sometimes mean better than he did. Either version makes a nice banging noise when it meets reality. The dinner, Wolfe said. He was found at the dining table, you say. But the dinner was Friday. Today is Tuesday. Why was he seated there yesterday morning? He was alone in the apartment. I had gone to spend the weekend with my sister in Greenwich. I returned Monday at 9. The table was set for 8. Not a single dish served, not a glass disturbed. Lawrence was in his chair at the head of the table. He looked as if he had paused mid-thought. He was holding a folded place card with a name on it. The name? She hesitated, then said softly, Mine. Wolfe didn't move. I did. Not in my seat, but inside my head. You don't need a mind like Wolfe's to hear the oddness in that. A place card for the hostess in the host's hand. 2 days before the guests arrive, with the hostess out of town. It had a neat smell of staging, of message, of intent. Did you touch anything? Wolfe asked. The police were called immediately. I did not touch the table. I did try to rouse him before I understood he was dead. Where was the body when the police arrived? In his chair. No signs of violence. No. Wolfe took the time to pick up his pencil, move it 2 inches, and set it down. It means he's sorting. The apartment was locked? Yes. The outer door was locked and the chain was on. There was no sign of forced entry. The service door in the kitchen was bolted. The windows were closed. Then the police find heart failure plausible. They said plausible. They said also the coffee pot on the sideboard had been used, a cup rinsed in the sink. They are looking at household items, at medication, at anything that could have caused it. They said perhaps something he ate or drank triggered anaphylaxis. It was all very clinical. Wolfe made a sound that might have been sympathy for clinical things. And you came to me because you are not satisfied. No. She folded her gloved hands in her lap. Because I think someone meant for him to die, or meant for him to be found as he was found. At the table, with your card in his hand, I said. Her eyes flicked to me, quick and not unfriendly. Yes. Do you know who would want such a thing? Wolfe asked. I know who might have reason to want him out of the way. She drew a breath, controlled enough to be almost invisible. Lawrence was a founding partner of a consulting firm, Varon Low Strategic Group. They advised corporations on mergers, public communications, crisis management. He was brilliant at it. It made enemies. The dinner was to finalize a deal for a client that would have changed the firm's direction. There was money involved, and reputation, and politics. Lawrence told me he expected resistance. I didn't grasp how much. Wolfe's mouth tightened, not from anger, but from calculation. Who are the other partners? Edward Lowe, of course, Victor Haynes, and a junior partner, Dina Kroll. Edward and Victor were to be at the dinner. Dina was not. Why not? She and Lawrence had disagreed about the deal. He thought her attendance would complicate the mood. Wolfe turned his head slightly, a rare movement that was nevertheless a whole paragraph. I infer that disagreements within the firm were acute. Tell me about the deal. She shook her head. I don't know the details. I know only that a client, Preston Aerodyne, was to merge with another company. A foreign investor group was involved. The senator I mentioned, State Senator Brooke, was invited because legislation affecting the merger is pending. Lawrence said it was a tight arrangement, delicate. He said Friday would settle it. And now Friday has been unsettled. Yes. She paused, then added, the dinner is still intended. Edward Lowe has asked that it proceed. He says it will honor Lawrence's work and prevent panic among the parties. That is very noble, I said. It sounded practical, she replied, but it also sounded like a man trying to keep his own hands on a steering wheel. Wolfe regarded her. You suspect Mr. Lowe? I suspect no one in particular. I suspect everyone around the dinner. The guests, the partners, those who knew it mattered, those who knew I was away, those who could reach Lawrence alone. Wolfe's eyes dropped to the desk blotter, then rose. What precisely do you ask of me? She looked as if she had rehearsed the next sentence and still disliked it. I want you to find out what happened. I want the truth. If Lawrence was killed, I want to know by whom and how. If he was not, if he was frightened, pressured, driven into some desperation I didn't see, I want to know that too. I want to know why he was sitting at that table with my card in his hand. Wolfe leaned back. Centimeter, which in him is like a wind shift. The police have not concluded. They will in time. In time, she said, her voice flat. The firm is already moving. The dinner will go on. People will talk in the rooms where money is made. Evidence will be brushed away by feet and waiters. The truth will become a ghost story everyone uses for advantage. I can't endure that. I watched her face as she said it. There was grief there, sure, but grief with a spine. It wasn't theatrics. It wasn't a widow's fog. It was a chess player who saw the board turning over and was willing to put a hand out to stop it. Wolfe stayed silent long enough that I could hear Fritz in the kitchen clinking copper. Finally he said, Your request is understandable. It is not yet compelling. She didn't flinch. Then I will make it compelling. How? She opened her handbag slowly, carefully. Out came a small black case. She set it on the edge of Wolfe's desk the way you set a fragile thing you don't want to be blamed for breaking. She flipped it open. I caught a glint of metal, maybe a flash drive, maybe keys, maybe something else. She slid out a single object and placed it atop the blotter. It was a place card. Heavy stock, cream paper, black ink, neat lettering, Mrs. Celeste Varin. Seeing it sitting on Wolfe's desk inside this house, elsewhere's everything. The brownstone doesn't like foreign furniture any more than Wolfe does. The card looked like a tiny intruder with perfect manners. I took it from his hand after the police left, she said quietly. They were done photographing. They said it meant nothing, a sentimental gesture. I knew it meant something. I kept it because I feared it would disappear. Wolfe didn't touch it. He looked at it as if it were a specimen under glass. There is a second card, she added. It was not on the table. I found it later, in the wastebasket under his desk in the study. Crumpled, partially torn. And the name? Wolfe asked. Not mine. She hesitated once more, then spoke the name as if she were releasing a bird she didn't trust. Dina Kroll. That did it. The air in the office altered. If you live with Wolfe long enough, you can feel his interest the way a sailor feels pressure before a storm. It comes without motion, without speech, but it changes the temperature. Sit, Wolfe said to her, though she already was. To me, he said, Archie, bring me the folder from the top right drawer. I got it and watched him place the cards side by side without touching them directly, using a letter opener. His fingertips stay clean, not from squeamishness, but from habit. He despises unnecessary fingerprints of any kind. So, he murmured, the hostess's card in his hand, the junior partner's card in his wastebasket. 2 days prior to an important dinner. A man alone, dead in his chair. No forced entry. A locked apartment. An occurring dinner that others insist must continue. A circle of persons for whom this death is convenient. Mrs. Varin looked at him. Will you take it? Wolfe's eyes flicked to the clock. 5:27. 3 minutes to the cutoff. He should have said no on principle. I expected him to. I was already composing the pleasant refusal in my head with a side order of regret to make her feel better. Instead he said, yes. Just one word. Quiet. Final. Like a judge tapping a gavel he doesn't need. Mrs. Varin didn't exhale in relief. She just nodded once, as if she had known how the board would fall. On one condition, Wolfe added. Name it. The dinner on Friday proceeds at your apartment, as scheduled. With all surviving intended guests present, Mr. Goodwin and I will attend. Her eyes widened. You don't leave this house. No. Wolfe looked faintly irritated by the reminder. I will not, but I will be present, in a manner of speaking. Mr. Goodwin will make arrangements. You will supply access, cooperation, and candor. She took that in. You mean to use the dinner. I mean to look where the facts are thickest. If the table turned deadly, it is the table that must be watched. I couldn't help myself. You hear that, Mrs. Varin? We're crashing your party. She managed a small smile, the first one I'd seen. It didn't reach her eyes. If it brings me the truth, you may bring the circus. Wolfe ignored me. You will leave those place cards here. Mr. Goodwin will visit your apartment in the morning to examine the arrangement and collect any other objects of relevance. He will also speak with Inspector Kramer to learn the status of the autopsy and police conclusions. She stood. Thank you. Wolfe made a short, dismissive gesture that might have meant you're welcome or don't mention it. She turned to me. Mr. Goodwin, I'll expect you at 10. I'll be there, bright-eyed and morally neutral. She went out, and I escorted her to the door. At the steps, she paused and looked back into the hall as if she were memorizing it for later use. You live in a remarkable place, she said. Wolfe thinks so. I'm still on the fence. She gave me a level look. You'll find out things you won't like. Lady, that's Tuesday for me. She left, footsteps crisp on the stone. I shut the door and stood there for a second, listening to the quiet settle back into the walls. Then I went to the office. Wolfe was still studying the cards like they were a pair of chess pieces that had moved on their own. Well, I said, I guess dinner is served. Friday. Do not be facetious, Wolfe said. Then after a beat, "But note the irony." I sat down. "You don't take cases before dinner, yet you just did. Why?" He didn't look at me. "Because there is a mixture of strategy and sentiment. Because the staging is elaborate and therefore informative. Because the conduct of Mr. Lowe is suspicious in its haste. Because Mrs. Varyn is intelligent and wronged. Because the dinner is intended to proceed, which provides us a circumstance. That's 5 becauses. The real one is missing." He finally glanced at me, eyes flat and bright. "Because a man died holding a card with his wife's name and discarded one with another woman's, whatever that means. It is not banal." I let that sit. Fritz chose that moment to knock lightly and announced that dinner would be in 20 minutes. Wolfe nodded without turning his head. The great machine of the house was already resuming its track, but a new cog had slid into the works. I looked again at the place cards on the blotter, quiet as snowflakes and about as innocent-looking. Cream paper, black ink, names, tiny rectangles that had outlived their owner and crossed the threshold of the brownstone. If you asked me right then how a dinner table could turn deadly on a Monday morning with no dinner in sight, I'd have told you I had no idea. But I also would have told you we were going to find out, because when Nero Wolfe says yes, the world tends to rearrange itself around that yes. And if it doesn't, I help it along. By the time Fritz announced dinner, Wolfe had already tucked the 2 place cards into a manila folder. He didn't do it with reverence exactly, but with the brisk care you give to things you know will matter later and don't want to admit it. I watched him slide the folder into the top right drawer of his desk as if he were putting away a dessert fork. "You will go at 10, he said. "Mrs. Varyn said 10, I agreed. "You said the dinner proceeds and we attend. I'm the one who has to pull off your attendance without getting you arrested for false advertising. Any preferences about how I explain your invisibility?" "Do not explain. Arrange." Wolfe pushed his napkin ring into its exact position beside the salt cellar. He had one of those ways of adjusting objects on his desk that makes you feel the entire universe is about to click into place. "Tell Mrs. Varyn that she will have a chair for me in the dining room. If it is occupied by a corpse again, I will take that as an insult." I grinned. "I'll deliver the message with the appropriate tact. Kramer might want our fingerprints on the candlesticks. Any objection to me telling him you're consulting from home?" "None, if it shortens his speech." Wolfe's eyes were already half on the clock and half on the idea he was tasting. "I want the autopsy report as soon as it is prepared, particularly toxicology. If it is poison, it was chosen with refinement." "You mean because he died sitting up in his chair like a man waiting for his soup?" "Partly. A violent poison is a poor instrument for a scene so composed." He paused. "And because a strategist selects his weapons to fit his rhetoric." That was Wolfe talking the way he does when he's warming up the engine. You could hear the pistons. I kept myself from asking what he thought the rhetoric was. You don't interrupt a man in the middle of his own appetites, mental or otherwise. Instead, I went upstairs to change into something field-worthy and not too formal. If you're going to nose around a dead man's apartment, you want a suit that survives contact with other people's emotions. At 9:30 the next morning, I was on West 71st in a building that was too discreet to brag about its rent, but too polished to pretend otherwise. Their doorman knew my name before I spoke it. Either Mrs. Varyn had briefed him, or the Varyns had the kind of life where every new face gets a mental dossier. He sent me up in a silent elevator that smelled faintly of lilies and old varnish. Celeste Varyn opened the door before I knocked. She wore charcoal slacks and a cream blouse with the sleeves rolled to her elbows, the uniform of a woman who doesn't want to look helpless even in her own hallway. Sleep had not been her friend, but she hadn't let it bully her either. "Come in, please." The apartment was quietly grand, the way good money does it. No gold swans, no screaming furniture, just space, real art, and an absence of corners where cheapness could hide. The living room ran long and airy toward a bank of windows. Past it, through a wide arch, was the dining room. I felt the hair on my arms give a polite salute. You don't walk into a room where a man died without noticing the temperature of it. The dining table was still set for 8. Not because the police had told her to preserve the scene. They never trust civilians with preservation, but because she had. The white cloth was perfectly smoothed, the china in 8 precise stations, silver aligned like a miniature parade, crystal glasses waiting for a reason to exist. There were place cards at each setting, blank now except for the empty slots where hers and Dina Kroll's might have been. The candles were new ones. The centerpiece was a low arrangement of winter greens and pale roses, so tasteful it could have been a thesis. You kept it the same, I said. She nodded. Edward Lowe asked if we intended to scrub the apartment. I told him no. Then, very quietly, I wanted to see it as Lawrence saw it. Sit with me a minute, I said. Walk me through Monday. Exactly. We sat in the living room, angled so I could still see the dining room out of the corner of my eye. She didn't fidget. She gave me the timeline the way some people give an address. Crisply, without drama, stubbornly accurate. She had left Friday afternoon for Greenwich after Lawrence said he needed the weekend to himself to finish preparations and think through his remarks. He had kissed her goodbye at the door, teased her about her sister's cooking, and promised he would not eat all the good olives before she returned. She had talked to him by phone Saturday evening at 7. He'd been in good spirits, admitted. He had done a trial seating plan for the dinner, complained that Senator Brooke was a political porcupine, and said he would see her on Monday. Sunday she had texted him late. No answer, but that wasn't unheard of. Monday morning she had driven back, arriving at 9. The doorman said he had not seen Mr. Varin leave Sunday night. She had used her key, slipped the chain, and found the apartment silent. She called his name. No answer. She entered the dining room and saw him in his chair. She thought he was asleep. She put a hand on his shoulder. He was already cold. When she realized that, she backed away, called the police, and waited in the foyer until they arrived. She did not ring Edward Lowe. She did not ring anyone else. She watched the police take over. She answered questions. She let them photograph the table and the study. After they left, she walked into the dining room alone, sat in Lawrence's chair for perhaps 30 seconds, and then, only then, took the place card from his hand. "That's the whole of it," she said. "Any weirdness before you left Friday? Any tension he didn't explain?" She looked toward the dining room as if part of him might still be sitting there with an opinion. He was preoccupied, not frightened, but focused. He told me there had been a complication with the guest list. He wouldn't say more. He said he'd handled it. Handled it how? I didn't press. When Lawrence said he'd handled something, he meant it. That was a nice wife's faith. It might also be the kind that gets you blindsided. "Let's see the study," I said. His study was a smaller room off a short corridor, and if the apartment was quietly grand, the study was quietly surgical. A big desk, a leather chair, books on strategy and rhetoric, framed photos that looked like they had been selected by a committee. The wastebasket was still there, a sleek metal cylinder that had been emptied and put back, but she pointed at it anyway. "I found the torn card under the papers you see there." She indicated a stack of folders on a side table. "I didn't show it to the police." "Good instinct for a woman who wants Wolfe to sniff around," I said. She didn't smile at that, but her eyes said she appreciated the frankness. I walked the room. I wasn't touching, just looking. The police will have dusted and poked. I'm no lab. What I look for is the human layer they miss because they're too busy being official. The desk had been reorganized recently. Too recently. Not by a neat man, but by someone trying to restore neatness after a disturbance. A pen holder slightly skewed, a blotter with a faint crease in it, a drawer that didn't quite sit flush. Little things, but little things are the alphabet of motive. "Did you move anything in here after Monday?" I asked. Only what the police asked me to move. Did they take anything? They took his laptop, his phone, a vial of medication from the bathroom cabinet. Vitamins mostly. They said they would return them when they were done. It wasn't much, but I filed it. Then I went back to the dining room and stood behind the head chair. The angle gave me the whole stage, the place settings, the sideboard with a silver coffee service, the distance to the kitchen door, the line of sight to the corridor. Lawrence had coffee here Sunday night? I asked. They said the pot was used. I hadn't smelled coffee when I arrived Monday, but the housekeeper came on Saturday morning and might have cleaned it then. The police said the cup had been rinsed, not washed. Do you drink coffee out here? Sometimes in the morning. Lawrence did more often if he was reading overnight reports. So the coffee service wasn't odd. No, but he wouldn't set the table for Friday and then sit down alone to drink coffee on Sunday unless something was pressing on him. Like rehearsal, I said, mostly to myself. She nodded. Yes, that's what I think. He was rehearsing something, or waiting. Waiting, with her card in his hand and Dinah Kroll's in the bin, waiting for a guest who wasn't supposed to be there, waiting for his own courage, waiting for the moment he thought strategy required. I bent slightly over the back of the chair, not to inspect the upholstery, but to picture him there. A strategist, a man who set the stage 2 days early, a man who held his wife's name as if it were the key to a decision and threw another woman's name away. Who knew you were in Greenwich? I asked. Everyone close to us. Lawrence told Edward and Victor in passing. He told the housekeeper, my sister and her husband, of course, probably Dina since they worked together. Lawrence didn't hide it. And who had keys besides you and him? She considered. The housekeeper has one, but it's on a ring that stays with her. The building superintendent has a master. That's all. No business partners with spares. No. I let that hang for a beat while I looked at the service door in the kitchen. It was high-end stainless, with a deadbolt and a chain. Police said locked, but locked doors are a comfort to honest people more than to clever ones. Clever ones use doors that are already allowed to open. Friday night, I said. You're still hosting. Yes. Edward Lowe will be there. Victor Haynes, Senator Brooke, the investor rep. Friends. A couple, she confirmed. A man Lawrence trusted from Aerodyne and his wife, and 2 long-time friends of ours, the Helmsleys. It was supposed to signal stability. It still might, after we stir it. Her gaze hardened. Do what you must. That's the idea. But between now and Friday, I'm going to meet your late husband's circle, starting with the partner who wants the show to go on. Where can I find Edward Lowe? At the firm. Their offices are on Madison in the 40s. I can call ahead. Don't, I said. Let him wonder who I am. It's better for my education. She gave me a short nod, understanding the game. I had the sense she was good at games, which probably meant her husband had been even better. That could be a comfort or a warning. When I left, I stood in the hallway for a second with the door half closed, looking back at the dining room through the arch. The table set for 8, the head chair empty, the quiet draped over it like a white cloth. A dinner that had already killed once doesn't stop being dangerous because you reset the forks. It just gets patient. I went down in the elevator thinking about patience, about rehearsals, and about the kind of man who would insist a dead partner's dinner proceed. If Edward Lowe was steering that wheel too hard, it was because he knew a curve was coming. Madison Avenue near 47th has that expensive clatter that never quite grows quiet, even at 11 in the morning. The building Verin Lowe Strategic Group occupied was one of those glass and limestone numbers that looks like it was designed to reassure investors and intimidate interns. I signed in, took a visitor badge I didn't need and didn't want, and rode up with a pair of young men in identical Navy suits talking about positioning like they'd invented it. The receptionist on their floor was a polished brunette with the fixed smile of someone who has learned that strangers are either clients or predators. I gave her my name and watched the smile do a small internal calculation. "I'm here to see Mr. Lowe," I said. "Do you have an appointment?" "No, but he's expecting to be bothered by somebody. I'd like to be the first." That got me a flicker of amusement. She picked up the phone with the sort of caution a nurse uses around a syringe. Her voice went soft, professional. She listened, then turned back to me. "Mr. Lowe will see you. Office on the left." I went in. Edward Lowe was what you expect a senior partner in a crisis advisory firm to look like. Late 50s, lean in a healthy way rather than a hungry one, silvering hair that hadn't surrendered to gravity yet, and eyes so clear and watchful you could imagine them reflecting spreadsheets in his sleep. His suit was grey and probably cost more than my first car. He rose when I entered, which told me he was a man of manners or a man of control. Sometimes it's the same thing. "Mr. Goodwin." He walked around the desk and offered a hand. "Celeste said you'd come. I'm sorry it's under these circumstances." I shook his hand. His grip was firm but not eager. He was measuring me. "Sorry is the right word," I said. "You were Lawrence's partner." "Since the beginning." He gestured to a chair. "Please, would you like coffee?" "No, thanks. I just saw a coffee service that may have killed a man. I'm off the stuff for the week." He blinked once, then smiled faintly. It didn't reach his eyes. "I don't know what Celeste has told you, but I assume you're here because she feels the police are moving too slowly." "Celeste feels a lot of things." I sat. "The police aren't my employer. Mr. Wolfe is, and she's paying him to find the truth before it gets tidied away." His mouth tightened at the word truth, the way some people react to lemon juice. "We all want the truth." "Do we? You're the one who wants the dinner to go on." He didn't flinch, because Lawrence wanted it to go on. He planned it for a purpose. If we cancel now, the purpose collapses into rumor. Our client, Aerodyne, is already shaky. The senator's involvement makes this delicate. One death is destabilizing enough. A cancelled dinner adds a second shock. I watched him while he spoke. He'd rehearsed that speech too. Partners do. The question is whether they rehearse to convince you or to convince themselves. "Lawrence set the table 2 days early," I said. His eyebrows rose a fraction. "Celeste mentioned that. He was meticulous. Meticulous men don't sit down alone on a Sunday night with their wife's place card in their hand and die." "I agree." Lowe's voice cooled. "But I don't know what to make of it beyond tragedy. Whatever happened, it blindsided me. I spoke to Lawrence Sunday afternoon around 3. He was fine." "You spoke to him?" "Yes. We discussed Friday's agenda. He was sharp. He had opinions about seating and timing. He joked about the Helmsleys drinking too much if the senator started pontificating." "Did he say anything about Dina Kroll?" A quick pause. Not a long one, but quick, as if his mind had knocked against a familiar edge. Dinah was unhappy about not being invited. Lawrence thought her presence would complicate matters. She disliked the optics of excluding her. "Optics? That's your language." He gave me a thin smile. "It's our business." Was it serious? The disagreement? It was professional. Lawrence and Dina clashed because he resisted her push to alter the Aerodyne strategy. Lowe leaned back. "Dina is talented but ambitious. She treated the dinner as a referendum on her influence." "Meaning what?" "Meaning she wanted to be there to impress our investors and Senator Brooke." Lawrence said no. "And you?" "I stayed out of it. They're both adults. They could manage." "Apparently not." I lifted my shoulders just enough to be rude. "Anyone else upset about that guest list?" He spread his hands. "Victor Haynes argued that Dina should attend, yes. He believes in transparency and all our partners being visible." Lawrence disagreed. "We debated it Friday morning." Lawrence was adamant. "And Victor?" Lowe's mouth flexed. Victor can be theatrical. He got over it. That told me Victor hadn't gotten over it. Theatrical people keep their grudges in the wings for later performances. Who knew Celeste was away? All of us, he said. Lawrence mentioned it. It was not confidential. I don't see the relevance. You don't have to. It's my job. I took out my notebook. Let's list the people at the dinner. You, Victor, Senator Brooke, Aerodyne's rep and his wife, the Helmsleys, Celeste, Lawrence, 8, correct? Yes. Any last-minute changes? No, unless Lawrence had planned something he didn't share. Like inviting Dina without telling anyone? His eyes narrowed. Lawrence wouldn't do that. Dina and Celeste, it would have been insulting. Besides, if Dina had been invited, she'd have told someone. She likes her victories witnessed. Interesting. That wasn't affection. That was irritation with an aftertaste of respect. Partners by close contact, not by love. How well did Lawrence know Senator Brooke? I asked. Moderately well. We've advised him on communications during 2 campaigns. Lowe frowned, but Lawrence was uneasy. Brooke is a friend to Aerodyne, but he has enemies in their rival company. That's why Lawrence wanted him here. Neutral ground. And the investor rep? Julian Fife, from Helicon Capital. British. Smooth. He was bringing a proposal that Lawrence considered essential. Essential enough to rehearse alone on Sunday? Lowe sat still. It's possible he was anxious. Did he have reason to be anxious about you or Victor? That one landed. His eyes went cold and he was careful not to show teeth. Mr. Goodwin, if you're suggesting one of us harmed Lawrence, say it plainly. I'm suggesting everybody who benefits from Lawrence being dead gets a seat on the list. Also everybody who might have wanted him scared, pressured, or silenced. That's standard procedure. He stared at me for 2 seconds, then let the breath go. Then you must include me. We are in a transitional moment at the firm. Lawrence's death is a catastrophe. Yes, it changes internal power, but that doesn't make me a murderer. No, I said. It makes you a candidate. The difference is important. He didn't like that. People who are used to controlling narratives hate being cast in one they didn't write. Tell me about the transitional moment, I said. He hesitated, then chose a version of the truth he thought he could afford. Aerodyne's merger would have reoriented our firm toward international corporate work. Lawrence was pushing for it. Victor was cautious. Dinah was aggressive in her own direction. We've been under strain. Strain enough to split? No, not split. Argue, yes. He looked me over again. What do you intend to do at the dinner? I smiled. Eat mostly. Observe. Ask a few questions that sound harmless but aren't. I'll be the mosquito at the picnic. And Nero Wolfe. He'll be present in a manner of speaking. I didn't add that Wolfe's manner of speaking could make grown men feel like schoolboys in wet socks. Lowe stood. If you need files, schedules, emails, we'll cooperate. Lawrence's office is being sealed for now, but you can see it with supervision. Supervision, I echoed. From you. From our operations head. Not me. We want you to have access without speculation. That was smart. Also alarming. Only people with something to hide worry about speculation before it started. I rose. One more thing. Where can I find Victor Haynes? Lowe's face smoothed. He's in a meeting until noon. He'll be at the firm all day. And Dina? He gave a small shrug. Working from home, I believe. She asked for a day to collect herself. She was close to Lawrence in her way. Everyone was close to Lawrence, I said. Close enough to fight him or bury him. I left him standing by the desk with his polite face back on. The receptionist looked up as I passed. I gave her a wink, which she didn't return, but she watched me go as if she'd like to read my badge backward. In the elevator down, I pulled out my phone and called Wolfe. Well, he said the moment he picked up. Lowe's calm, rehearsed and already arranging how his firm looks after a death. He wants the dinner to proceed for stability. He says he spoke to Lawrence Sunday afternoon and Lawrence was fine. Disagreement over guest list. Dinah wanted in. Lawrence said no. Victor backed Dinah. Lowe stayed Swiss. Swissness, Wolfe murmured, is often a disguise. Also, Lowe thinks Lawrence would never have invited Dinah secretly. Claims Dinah likes her wins public. Lowe does not like Dinah much, which is useful. Did you observe any inconsistency? Nothing you can hang a corpse on. One twitch on Dinah's name, another on the word truth. I paused. He offered access to Lawrence's office, with supervision. He's leading us by the hand. Good. A hand extended is a hand that may be slapped away. Wolfe's voice went a little distant, which meant he'd already moved on to thinking. Go now to see Victor Haynes. That's next. I hesitated a beat. Also, if Lawrence was alive and sharp, Sunday at 3, he died later. Somebody had a window, somebody with access. Yes. Wolfe said it simply. I clicked off and stepped out onto Madison again. The street was loud enough to swallow a secret, but it doesn't swallow motives. Motives walk beside you and pretend to be tall. Victor Haynes's office was 3 doors down from Lowe's. I didn't need a receptionist this time. A young assistant in a lavender tie sent me in before introducing me, which told me Victor liked interruptions because they made him feel important. Victor Haynes was mid-40s, broad-shouldered, with a face that might have been handsome if it weren't so eager to express itself. He stood up fast, pumped my hand as if we were running mates, and smiled wide enough to show he'd been to a dentist who believed in ambition. Archie Goodwin, Nero Wolfe's right arm, I'm honored. He gestured flamboyantly. Sit, sit. I was just lamenting to Edward that we're all trapped in a nightmare. Nightmares are my commute, I said. Tell me about Sunday. He blinked. Sunday? When did you last speak to Lawrence? His smile sagged at the edges. Saturday morning. He was energized, nervous, maybe, but he said the dinner would settle things, that he had a plan. What plan? He wouldn't say. You know Lawrence. Strategic to his bones. He liked the reveal. Victor leaned forward, elbows on knees. Look, I'll be blunt. This doesn't feel natural. He wasn't sick. He wasn't careless. Somebody wanted him quiet. Who? His mouth opened, shut, opened again into a rapid answer that went nowhere. Too many candidates. We're in business with money, ego, politics. Dinah's furious about being excluded. Julian Fife wants the deal on his terms. Senator Brooke has enemies who'd love a scandal. Hell, even Erodine's board would benefit if Lawrence couldn't steer them. Nice buffet of suspicion, I said. Where were you Sunday night? He looked startled, then offended in a way that was almost sincere. Home. I had my kids. We watched a movie. My wife can confirm every minute if she must. Don't get theatrical on me, Victor. I'm collecting facts, not casting you in stripes. He sat back, then nodded slowly. All right. Facts. Dinah and Lawrence fought Friday. Not a little dust-up. A real one. She believed she'd earned a seat at that table. Lawrence told her her presence would skew perception. She said he was undermining her. She stormed out. Where? In the conference room here. Edward was present. I was present. It was messy. Did Lawrence say anything after? About regret? About making amends? Victor chewed that. He said he'd handle it. Same phrase he always used when he meant he was going to do something none of us had anticipated. I felt a small click in my head. Same phrase Celeste had used. I kept my face casual. So he handled it. Then he set the table early, held his wife's card, tore Dinah's up. I let that hang in the air between us. What do you suppose he was handling? Victor's eyes darted as if he'd like to dodge the question by changing chairs. Maybe he decided to invite Dino after all, to show unity, but why tear the card then? Unless, not invite her, but confront her. Or confront Celeste, or meet someone privately, I said, at that table, before Friday. He stared at me. You think someone came there Sunday night? I think a lock on a door doesn't stop a person who's been welcomed. I stood. Thanks, Victor. Keep your facts warm. Friday's going to be interesting. He rose too, anxious. Please tell Mr. Wolfe we're grateful. And be careful. Whoever did this is not timid. I walked out feeling like I'd just left a theater with the lights still on. Victor was all spotlight and emotion, but he had dropped 2 solid props on the stage. A real fight with Dina, and Lawrence's habit of saying he'd handle it right before he did something clever and possibly dangerous. Back on the street, I dialed Saul Panzer, because increased pressure is Wolfe's favorite seasoning, and Saul is how he sprinkles it. No, Saul said when I reached him. I haven't heard of any Helicon fellow or any senator trouble yet. Want me on Brooke? On everybody, I said. Start with Dinah Kroll. Quiet background, recent movements, who she saw Sunday, then Julian Fife's schedule, and find out if Senator Brooke has a tale of enemies longer than his title. Call me when you've got something worth $1. Make it 2, Saul said, and hung up. I called Wolfe again to relay Victor's angle, and Wolfe listened without interrupting. Good, he said finally. The phrase, handle it, is a thread. Threads lead. Leads to what? To a meeting, to a decision, perhaps to a trap. Wolfe paused. You will see Dina Kroll today. On it. And Archie, do not allow your cynicism to obscure Mrs. Varen. She is not merely a client, she is a participant. That was Wolfe in warning mode, and I didn't like it because when Wolfe warns me, I'm about to step into something that bites. I hear you, I said. I hung up and headed to the subway, because Dinah Kroll, furious and excluded, was a junior partner with plenty of ambition and very possibly a key to a locked door. And if Lawrence had planned a private rehearsal on Sunday night, he might have invited the one person he'd just insulted, either to mend the fence or to light it on fire. Either way, the table had already been set for more than dinner. Dina Kroll lived on the Upper East Side in one of those buildings that looks like it was built to keep emotions out. The lobby was marble, the doorman was silent, and the elevator had the kind of mirror that makes you check your tie just to prove you're still a citizen. I was announced upstairs by a buzzer that sounded like it hated the job. A voice came through, clipped and cool. Yes? Archie Goodwin. I work for Nero Wolfe. A beat, then, I know who you work for. Come up. The door on the 12th floor was open before I got my hand to the bell. Dina Kroll stood there in jeans and a dark green sweater that might have looked casual on another woman, but on her looked like a uniform chosen to prove she didn't need uniforms. Early 30s, athletic build, sharp jaw, black hair pulled into a knot that had never seen hesitation. Her eyes were gray and busy and didn't waste time on small talk. You're late, she said. Not rude, just factual. It's New York, I said. Time is a suggestion here. Are you going to invite me in or interrogate me on the landing? She stepped back without a word. The apartment was smaller than the Varen's place by about 3 tax brackets, but it was elegant in that hungry, upward way. Books and awards arranged to be casual, but not too casual. A framed ad campaign on the wall, a view of the river that had to be paid for monthly. She didn't offer coffee. She didn't offer a seat. She went to a bar cart, poured herself water, and leaned against the counter like she expected me to begin with my confession. You excluded from a dinner, Dina? I asked. Her head snapped toward me. So that's the lens they're using. I was excluded, therefore I must be suspect. Not must. Might. Everybody who knew Lawrence and had a reason to care is a suspect, even the people who think suspects are other people. Save the patter, she said. Ask what you came to ask. All right. She wanted chess without the handshake. Friday you fought with Lawrence about the dinner. True? Yes. Messy? Define messy. I didn't throw a chair. You stormed out. I left when it became clear the conversation was pointless. She took one sip of water, set the glass down too neatly. Lawrence wanted to stage a picture, a serene table of carefully selected faces. He didn't want me there because I complicate the story he was selling. Which story? That Aerodyne's merger is a settled triumph under his guidance. Her voice hardened. He treated me like a loose thread. Loose threads can snag a suit, I said. Maybe he wanted to pull you aside before Friday. Did he contact you after the fight? No. You sure? She stared at me like I'd insulted her math. He didn't call. He didn't text. He didn't come by my office. He didn't send a note through Edward. He didn't do anything. He was stubborn enough to let silences do his work. And you? I tried to reach him Saturday afternoon. One call. He didn't pick up. I assumed he was busy or sulking. I didn't try again. Then Sunday night, her eyes narrowed. Why Sunday night? Because he died sometime after 3 Sunday afternoon. Lowe says he spoke to him then and he was fine. Victor says he last spoke Saturday, so Sunday night is a hole. Were you in it? Her mouth drew a tight line. There was anger there, but it didn't look like the anger of someone caught. It looked like the anger of someone sick of being asked to play defense. I was at home, she said. Alone. I worked. I watched a stupid documentary. I went to bed around 11. You can check my phone data if you like. Or Edward can, since he probably already asked for it. Did he? He asked where I was when I heard. Not when it happened. But I can see the question hanging behind his eyes. She tilted her head. You think I went there? To Lawrence's apartment? To talk or to kill him? I think you had motive to go there for a private meeting, or he had motive to ask you to come. The place card with your name was torn up in his wastebasket. That got her. The muscles along her jaw tightened in a quick ripple. My name was on a place card. Supposedly. Torn. Found after the fact. Celeste told you this? Yes. Dina looked past me toward the window, not because the river had become interesting, but because she was doing a fast internal audit. I wasn't invited. I didn't plan to crash. If Lawrence made a card for me and then tore it up, that's typical Lawrence. He'd build a scenario, weigh it, and discard it if it didn't serve his goal. So he did consider inviting you. Or considered confronting me about why he wouldn't. She let out a short breath. He liked to win twice, once in the plan, once in the telling. Anyone else in the firm you think wanted him gone? She gave me a look that said she'd been waiting for a question worth answering. Edward wants the merger because it cements his legacy. Victor likes the idea of international prestige, but he fears the politics. Lawrence was the deciding weight. Without him, Edward is free to drive harder, and Victor is free to posture about caution while still taking the credit if it succeeds. That sounds like motive. It's business, she said. Motive is baked in. What about Helicon's rep, Julian Fife? She made a small face. Slick. He thinks we're all pawns. But if he wanted Lawrence out, he'd do it with a contract, not a corpse. Helicon needs stability from our side. Senator Brooke? Arrogant, useful, not personal. He didn't kill Lawrence. If Lawrence was killed, it was someone close enough to hate him quietly. Close enough like a junior partner who got shut out of a big dinner. You're doing it again. She stepped away from the counter, crossing to a bookshelf. She ran a fingertip along the spine of a thick volume. Game theory and corporate negotiation. Look, I cared about that dinner because of what it meant for the firm. I didn't care enough to murder a man who made me a partner. Lawrence fought me, yes. He humiliated me, yes. But he also hired me, believed in me, and pushed me to be sharper. I admired him. I still do. That doesn't vanish because I was furious Friday. The way she said admired wasn't sentimental. It was factual, like a line item in a budget. I believed her. That didn't clear her, but it meant she wasn't simple. You said you were alone Sunday. I said, anyone can be alone, but alone is a good place to receive a call. Did Lawrence call you Sunday night? She shook her head. No. Did you call him? No, I was angry. I didn't want to give him the satisfaction of my attention. Did anyone else call you? She frowned. Victor texted Sunday around 8. We need to talk. Call me tomorrow. That was all. About what? Probably about the dinner. Victor likes to play mediator when it flatters him. Did you talk to him Monday? No. I found out Lawrence was dead before I could. Her voice dipped, and for the first time I heard the raw edge. Edward called me at 9:30. I thought it was to apologize or to negotiate. He said, Lawrence is gone. I thought he meant gone to a meeting. Then he said the word dead. I sat on this sofa and stared at the wall for 10 minutes. I watched her hands. They were steady now, but her knuckles were pale. She was holding tight. What did Edward say after that? That we needed to be unified, that the dinner was still on, that Celeste wanted Wolfe, that the police were involved. She scoffed. He didn't ask how I was. He asked if I could be discreet. Discreet about what? About my anger, about the fight, about anything that could look like instability. Her eyes sharpened at me. Do you see why Celeste called Wolfe? Edward is already managing the narrative. Wolfe said the same thing, minus your colorful adjectives. I paused. Did you ever have a romantic relationship with Lawrence? She stiffened, then laughed once, short and sharp. That's cute. No. Not even close? Lawrence was married. She said it as if that was the end of the category. And if you're asking whether I was the reason Celeste's card was in his hand, you're chasing a tabloid shadow. Lawrence and I were professional adversaries. He didn't need to sleep with me to take me seriously. All right. I didn't apologize. She'd live. Then why do you think your card was torn up? She looked down, thinking. Because he was considering something. She met my eyes again. Maybe an apology. Maybe a compromise. Maybe a trap for me. He liked traps. If he tore it up, he decided against whatever it was. That decision might matter. Like deciding to keep you out of Friday and then meeting you privately Sunday to smooth it over anyway, I said. A flicker again in her eyes. Not guilt, interest. If he invited me privately, he'd say so. He wouldn't leave it to a piece of paper, unless he expected someone else to see it. Like Celeste. Her jaw tightened once more, but this time it was not anger at me. It was a new thought taking a seat. You're suggesting he staged something for her? She said slowly. That he wanted her to find him, with her card, and mine torn up as a message. Right now I'm suggesting nothing. I'm collecting shapes, I said. Wolfe does the picture. She looked at me for a full second, then nodded. Fine. Here's a shape. Lawrence was frightened of one thing lately. What? He thought someone was feeding Aerodyne 2 competing strategies. One from him, one from inside our firm, undermining him. He suspected a leak. Did he say who? No, he was trying to catch it. She hesitated. He said he might do something dramatic to flush them out. There it was again. Handle it, dramatic, flush them out. The words of a man who liked to set a board and watch pieces move. Did he say when he'd do it? He implied Friday. At the dinner, he said, the table will tell the truth if you seat the right people. I felt a chill that wasn't from the radiator. That's a Wolfe line if I ever heard one. Maybe Lawrence was auditioning for the job. Dina's mouth twitched. He admired Wolfe, actually. He read him in college. Terrific. He also got himself dead before a showy reveal. Any idea how he planned to flush the leak? No. But he was probing everyone. Edward, Victor, even me. He asked me sharp questions last week about who I'd spoken to at Helicon, what I'd promised them, what they'd asked. He was baiting for inconsistency. Did you feel baited? Yes, I told him to stop treating me like a suspect. He smiled and said, "If you aren't one, you'll enjoy the game." "That smile get him killed, maybe," I muttered. She heard me. If someone killed him, they did it because he was close. Close to what? Close to naming them, or close to pushing the merger in a way that hurt them. I stood. "Thanks, Dina. You were helpful and pleasantly hostile. I'll let Wolfe know about the leak and the dramatic plan." She walked me to the door, then said quietly, "Archie, Celeste isn't fragile, but she doesn't know the firm. If Lawrence left her a message with those cards, it might be one she won't decode without you." "Wolfe told me she's a participant," I said. Dina nodded. "Then don't let Edward turn her into scenery." I left with that in my pocket and the river behind me swollen and grey. On the sidewalk, I called Wolfe again. "Dina says Lawrence suspected a leak inside the firm, feeding Aerodyne competing strategies. He planned something dramatic to flush it out, maybe at Friday's dinner. He told her, quote, 'The table will tell the truth if you seat the right people.' Also, she got a text from Victor Sunday night. 'We need to talk. Call me tomorrow.' She swears she was home all Sunday and no contact with Lawrence." There was a pause on the line, the kind that means Wolfe is arranging the shapes I'd handed him. "Excellent," he said at last. "The leak supplies motive beyond vanity. It also supplies urgency. A person who fears exposure acts sooner than planned." Another beat. "Archie, return now. We must speak before you see Inspector Kramer." "You want me to see Kramer today?" "Yes, and bring Saul Panzer's findings when they come. If Lawrence Varin set that table as a trap, then his killer may have sprung it early." "On my way," I said. I headed for the subway, feeling the case tighten like a suit you hadn't noticed shrinking. A leak, a planned reveal, a dinner, stage already saturated with strategy. Now with the host dead and the dinner still scheduled like an encore. And somewhere in the middle of that board was Celeste Varin, holding a widow's grief in one hand and a strategist's message in the other, waiting for us to read it right before someone else rewrote it. Friday came as Fridays do in our line of work, too fast, wearing a polite mask over a bad intention. The November dusk was already squeezing the city when I reached the Varin apartment a little before 7. Mrs. Varin answered the door herself. She was in black, simple, not theatrical, and her face had that composure you find in people who've slept at the edge of a cliff and decided the view won't kill them. "You're early," she said. "I like to see the stage before the actors start believing their lines." She gave me the smallest nod and stepped aside. The apartment smelled different than when I'd been there Tuesday. Not because anything had changed physically. She had kept the place the same, like a museum that charges admission in grief. But now there were people in the kitchen. Soft footsteps, faint clink of glass. A dinner about to happen always changes a room the way a storm changes air. I glanced through the arch into the dining room. The table had 9 settings. 8 were fully dressed. The 9th was a deliberate question. Same china, same silver, a crystal glass, a folded napkin, placed midway down the long side, visible to everyone, but with no place card. A seat you could not ignore without showing you'd noticed. Mrs. Varin saw me looking. "Is it right?" "It's perfect," I said. "If Lawrence meant to make somebody sweat, he'd approve." Her mouth tightened. "I hope he sees it." I didn't answer that. I'm superstitious in the way people get when death is standing in a doorway. Instead, I moved to the living room and opened my notebook. There's a practical reason for arriving early at these things. You set your own nerves before other people set theirs on you. At 7:10, the first guests arrived, the Helmsleys, a polished couple with the posture of people who have survived each other's dinner parties for 20 years. At 7:15, Martin Hale and his wife, careful, gracious, visibly out of practice with tragedy. At 7:25, Julian Fife appeared, tall and narrow and dressed in the kind of charcoal suit that makes New York men look like they were born in London. He came with no wife, which Celeste had told me to expect. "She's in Boston on business," she'd said, and her tone made it clear she thought wives were either present or irrelevant, but always accounted for. Fife took Celeste's hand and murmured something low I couldn't hear. Sympathy, probably, and maybe a quick mental tabulation of what this did to his leverage. Men like Fife do sums the way some men breathe. Senator Brooke arrived last among the officially invited, at 7:40. He filled the doorway with his smile, his handshake, and the faint aura of someone who believes every room is a podium if he stands still long enough. He kissed Celeste's hand. He clasped mine with a familiarity that suggested he'd never met a stranger who wasn't a voter. His eyes flicked over the dining room arch and snagged on the 9th setting. The flick was fast, but it happened. He didn't comment. Politicians almost never do in front of witnesses. Edward Lowe and Victor Haynes came together at 8, because that's what you do when you want to look unified. You arrive like a matched set. Lowe was calm, courteous, and a shade too smooth, like a man who has ironed out his grief along with his cuffs. Victor was all warmth, too much, almost spilling. He hugged Celeste longer than necessary, spoke too loudly about Lawrence's brilliance, blessed the room with his sorrow, the way a preacher blesses a crowd. As they crossed toward the living room, Victor saw the 9th setting. It was like watching a man step into cold water without expecting it. He didn't freeze, he didn't stammer, but his shoulders lifted a fraction and his eyes tightened for just the breath it took to read that seat as more than an extra plate. He glanced once at Lowe, quick enough to be denied later, and then he smiled wide at the world again. I filed that in the same drawer where I'd put his taxi lie. We circled drinks for 15 minutes because that's what civilized people do when they don't know where else to place their hands. Celeste stayed composed, moving with the quiet ownership of the room. I stayed mostly silent and watched. There are nights when you can feel the rope tightening before anyone knows a noose is in the room. This was one. At 8:25, the doorbell rang again. Everybody turned. Celeste looked at me, startled. "No one else is due?" "I know," I said. "Let's see what Lawrence wrote into the evening." I went to the foyer and opened the door. It was Sergeant Stebbins. He didn't look like an invited guest, but he did look like a man who had been instructed to be polite about intrusion. "Mr. Goodwin," he said, "Inspector Kramer suggests you should be aware he and 2 detectives are downstairs in the service hall. For security. Tell him I'm thrilled. He can share my hors d'oeuvres through the wall." Stebbins smothered a smile and left. When I returned to the living room, the temperature had shifted, the way it does when you mention police in a room full of people who have their own sense of innocence. Lowe's face stayed neutral. Fife's eyebrows rose in mild annoyance. Brooke's smile remained on, but his eyes recalibrated. Victor's gaze, meanwhile, had slid to that 9th seat again and stuck there like a needle finding thread. Celeste announced dinner. We moved in. She took her place at Lawrence's right. Lowe took the opposite head. Brooke was placed across from Celeste, Fife beside him. The Helmsleys and the Hales filled the remaining chairs. I took the chair at the far side, close enough to see everything, far enough to keep anyone from feeling I was breathing down their neck. The 9th seat remained empty. It remained loud. Fritz wasn't there, thank God. I like him, but this wasn't a night for innocent bystanders. Celeste's caterer served quietly, with the trained blankness of people whose job is to make sure luxury happens without leaving fingerprints. Conversation started like a car in winter, reluctant, then steady. Lawrence's name was invoked, praised, mourned, and finally parked at the edge of the table where people could glance at it without driving into it. 15 minutes into the first course, I stood and lifted my glass. "I'm going to ask your indulgence for 5 minutes," I said. "Mr. Wolfe can't be here in person, but he is present. A few heads turned sharply. Lowe's eyes narrowed. Brooke looked amused. Fife looked as though he'd prefer a clean negotiation to a televised one. Victor's smile faltered half a notch. I took my phone from my pocket, placed it on the sideboard, and hit speaker. Wolfe's voice came out full and calm, as if he were seated at the other end of the table rather than 9 blocks and his stiff preference away. "Good evening." There is something about Wolfe's voice in a room that makes people sit straighter even if they don't know why. It doesn't bully. It assumes obedience. "Mr. Wolfe," Celeste said, steady. "Thank you." "Mrs. Varin." "My condolences." Then to the table. "You are assembled because Lawrence Varin intended you to be. He intended this dinner as an instrument. It has become another instrument. I must inquire, and you must answer. It will not take long if you cooperate." Brooke cleared his throat. "Mr. Wolfe, with respect, this is highly irregular." "Senator," Wolfe said mildly, "irregularity is not your field of expertise." Brooke laughed once, more surprised than amused. Wolfe pressed on before anyone found footing. "On Sunday night, between 9 and 11, Lawrence Varin was in this room, alone at the head of this table. He drank coffee. The coffee contained aconitine. He died in his chair. The apartment was locked. There was no forced entry. Therefore, the poison was introduced by someone he admitted." Silence. Even the forks felt quieter. Wolfe continued. "On Monday, he was found holding a place card bearing his wife's name. Another place card, bearing Miss Kroll's name, had been torn and discarded. In his pocket was a note. Seat 9. There are 9 settings here tonight. Observe the 9th seat." Every eye slid to it. Victor's did not slide. They snapped. "It was intended for a person who was to be present Sunday night," Wolfe said. "If that person had arrived, this seat would have been assigned. He did arrive. The seat was not assigned because Lawrence Varin died before he could place the card." Lowe shifted. "Mr. Wolfe, are you saying Lawrence invited someone here privately?" "I was unaware of any." "Mr. Lowe," Wolfe said, and the way he said it sounded like a scalpel setting down on skin. "You spoke to Lawrence at 3 Sunday afternoon, yes?" "Yes." "He was well?" "Yes." "And you did not speak to him again?" "No." "Nor did you visit him that night?" Lowe's voice was cool. "I did not." "Good. Then you are not seat 9. Lowe stiffened. The rest of the table digested that as confirmation and threat. Wolfe went on. "Miss Kroll was not invited to this dinner. She was at home Sunday night, and no communication passed between her and Lawrence Varin after Saturday. Senator Brooke was at a fundraiser in Queens until 10 Sunday night. Mr. Fife was at a restaurant on Columbus Avenue at the hour of death. Mr. Hale was at home with his wife. Mrs. Helmsley, Mr. Helmsley and Mrs. Varin were not in this apartment. I could hear Kramer downstairs grinding his molars, but Wolfe had already done what Kramer never manages. He had the room pinned by logic before anyone had time to wriggle. That leaves one person who came here Sunday night," Wolfe said. "One person who lied about it afterward. One person who was directly threatened by Lawrence Varin's plan for this dinner." Victor's voice came out bright and a shade too loud. "This is crazy. What plan? What are you talking about?" "The plan to expose the leak," Wolfe said. "Lawrence Varin believed someone inside his firm was feeding Aerodyne alternate strategic guidance to influence the merger. He intended to reveal that betrayal tonight, a betrayal that would have destroyed the career and standing of its author." Victor stared at the phone as if he might will it silent. "Mr. Haynes," Wolfe said, "you supported Miss Kroll's attendance at this dinner. You argued for her inclusion because you believed her exclusion would skew perception, yes?" Victor swallowed. "Yes, because it would." Lawrence refused. "Yes. He told both you and Miss Kroll he would handle it." Victor's eyes flicked to me like he couldn't help seeking a lifeline. I smiled thinly. "On Sunday evening," Wolfe said, You left your home around 9:30, took a taxi to this building, entered by invitation, and returned home after 11. You told your partners you were home with your children. You lied. Victor pushed his chair back hard enough to scrape. That's not true. It is. The taxi record exists. The driver remembers the doorman and the address. The police downstairs will confirm. Brooke leaned back slowly, face sharpening from politician to predator. Fife went very still. Lowe's knuckles whitened around his fork. Victor turned red in patches. So I stopped by. Because Lawrence called me. Because he wanted to talk. That doesn't mean I killed him. Let us see, Wolfe said. Lawrence invited you to occupy seat 9. He had prepared a place card for you. He had not placed it because he did not intend to reveal your presence to his wife then. He intended this dinner to do that with ceremony. Victor's mouth opened, then closed. His eyes jittered across the table. I could almost see the gears catching. You were the leak, Mr. Haynes, Wolfe said softly. Not by clumsy malice, but by vanity. You believed Lawrence was driving the firm too far into Helicon's orbit. You preferred to temper the merger or reshape it by giving Aerodyne a competing line of counsel, anonymously, through intermediaries. You thought you were safeguarding the firm while positioning yourself as indispensable. That is insane, Victor hissed, and yet Lawrence discovered it. He arranged to confront you Sunday night and to expose you Friday. You came to avert that. You brought coffee, either already dosed or dosed here. You are familiar with crisis toxins and their optics. Your wife maintains a garden at your country house in Westchester. She grows monkshood among her ornamentals for its color. You had access to the plant, to its tincture, to its poison. Aconitine in coffee produces a death that appears peaceful until it is tested. Victor's face did a curious thing. The outrage drained without being replaced by innocence. It left behind naked calculation. You can't prove any of that, he said, and his voice had dropped to a near whisper. You're guessing with a loud microphone. No, Wolfe said. I am deducing from a pattern you did not foresee. You did not foresee Lawrence leaving that note. You did not foresee his wife preserving the tableau. You did not foresee my interest. You did not foresee the taxi record. You did not foresee the 9th seat. Victor's eyes flew to the empty setting again. It sat there like a mirror. He was going to ruin me, Victor said, suddenly hoarse. You understand that? He was going to annihilate me in front of Helicon, Aerodyne, Brooke, everyone. He was going to make me the villain to cleanse his narrative. I went there to talk him out of it. I didn't go there to... He stopped. The stop was the confession. Lowe stood up sharply. Victor turned on him. Don't you Victor me. You knew he was setting me up. You pretended neutrality while he sharpened the knife. You wanted me out as much as he did. Lowe's face clenched, but Wolfe cut through the heat with ice. Mr. Haynes, Wolfe said, you have now said enough. Inspector Kramer will come upstairs and take you into custody. I heard the sound of footsteps in the hall before Wolfe finished the sentence. Kramer appeared at the dining room doorway with 2 detectives behind him. He had the look of a man who hates being right, only slightly less than he hates being outplayed. Victor Haynes, Kramer said, you're under arrest for the murder of Lawrence Varon. Victor didn't fight. He looked once at the 9th seat as if it had been the thing that killed him, not his own hands, and then he let the detectives take his arms. As they led him out, the room remained frozen in the wake of his collapse. The guests stared at their plates as if food had become an accusation. Kramer lingered a moment, eyes on Wolfe's phone. You happy, Wolfe? I'm never happy, Wolfe said. But I'm satisfied. Kramer grunted and left. For a long breath, no one moved. Then Celeste Varon stood. She didn't cry. She didn't sway. She lifted her chin and said quietly, "This dinner is over." No one argued. People rose, murmured their hollow condolences to her, and drifted out like survivors of a shipwreck who didn't want to look at the sea again. Lowe stayed long enough to squeeze her shoulder, his face full of corporate regret, and then he too went, already calculating the press releases he would have to write in the morning. When the door finally closed behind the last guest, Celeste and I stood alone in the dining room with the 9 settings and 1 missing man. She looked at the empty head chair. "He was right," she said, almost to herself. The table did tell the truth. Yes. She turned to the 9th seat. He expected Victor. He probably expected him to confess or break. Instead, Victor handled it first. "Lawrence played hard," I said gently. "Hard enough for someone to panic." She nodded, accepting that without flinching. "He tried to protect the firm, and me. Those cards, he wanted me to see that he chose me, even in the plan. He tore Dina's because he chose not to use her as bait against me." Her voice softened. "He didn't want another woman's name on that table in my sight unless it was necessary." It wasn't a romantic conclusion. It was truer than romance. "You'll be all right?" I asked. She gave me a look that said, "All right" was a small word for nights like this. "I will be accurate. That's what Lawrence taught me. Accuracy, even when it hurts." I didn't have a clever answer for that. I just nodded. Back at the brownstone later, Fritz had kept dinner warm in a way that would have made the Helmsleys weep with envy. Wolfe was at the table, already working on his 2nd course as if appetite were a moral duty. "Well?" he said, without looking up. Victor folded, as predicted. He confessed just enough to hang himself. Kramer hauled him out. Your 9th seat did its job. Wolfe chewed thoughtfully. It was Lawrence Varen's 9th seat. I merely used his instrument. You feel any guilt for finishing a dead man's trap? Wolfe set his fork down precisely. Guilt is for those who neglect what they perceive. Lawrence Varen perceived betrayal and attempted to rectify it. He failed only by the villain's haste. I did not finish his trap. I prevented the trap from dying with him. Sakur, I sat, exhausted in the bones, and accepted Fritz's plate. Wolfe lifted his glass of beer and regarded it as if it were a point of philosophy. Observe, Archie. Strategy is a noble faculty when employed to illuminate truth. When employed to conceal it, it becomes the preface to decay. Mr. Haynes was not undone by poison. He was undone by his own confusion of those uses. I took a bite because Fritz makes even moral reflections taste better. So the lesson is, don't play chess with the guy who sets the board 2 days early. Wolfe looked at me over the rim of his glass. The lesson is, do not sit at a table you have poisoned and expect the empty chair to stay silent. I grinned, tired and satisfied in my own way. Outside, the brownstone was quiet again, the orchids safe upstairs, the doorbell obedient. Inside, at our own dinner table, there were only 2 settings and no one had to worry about seat 9.